Okay. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are glad you joined us. We have a special guest with us, Meg Till, who's a behavioral therapist. Today is Thursday, February the 21st, correct? Yes. Okay.
22nd.
22nd. I'm
22nd.
sorry, guys. I'm sorry. But we are happy to have Meg with us. This is our first professional on advocacy. I think this is going to be a definite, enjoyable, informative session. So let's tune in. And Meg, you have the floor. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Well, first of all, no pressure for being the first professional. So thanks for that. Didn't know that. um, yeah, okay. I guess a little bit just about me. I'm from South Africa. Moved to the UK when I was 18. Got an undergrad in sports coaching. And that finally led me to apply for a summer camp job in America. And the camp I worked at was inclusive, worked with both kids with and without special needs. Didn't really have a lot of experience with the special needs population before then, and fell in love. Knew that that was kind of the direction I wanted to go in, but didn't entirely know what was available here in the US. And when we moved to Pennsylvania, I started working at an improved private school. And within the first month of me working at the center, I applied for my master's in special education. I had a endorsement in autism studies and applied behavior analysis. My time working there, I had experience from ages 3 to 21 in a multitude of different disabilities. I was super lucky with my supervision hours to become a BCBA, so the board certified behavior analyst. And once we moved down to Jacksonville, Florida, I was able to study and get my board certification, a test I never want to take in my life ever again. But it was completely worth it. Also became a citizen that same month. So yay, America. And yeah, I started the first job I then had, like, because I was a specialist in Pennsylvania, in Florida. I worked for a school district. And yeah, I did that for 3 years, where I got to work with the emotional behavioral classrooms. So conduct disorders, ODD, so oppositional defiant, and kind of everything that goes along with that. So I really have had experience with a lot of different disabilities and learning difficulties. And then currently I am working in home. So I was able to let me just switch over my Wi-Fi real quick. Um, so I have really the only place that I really haven't worked in is a clinic, and that's on the list to eventually do. Um,
Well, while you're doing that, Meg, let me go ahead and just ask you um, about, what's so why do you want to work in a clinic? Maybe I don't understand like the difference between working in a clinic, a school, a camp. Um, I'm assuming that there's a difference in you working in a clinic than you working in a school or a camp.
yeah, so in a clinic, it is a very, very specific and very clinical for a clinic, where it is the kids come in and all they truly do is the same room, the same table, sort of, and just working on all of those ABA strategies that is specific to their individualized plan. Because ultimately, it seems like it's still delayed, isn't it?
Mhm.
it was going so well.
I
Is that
think
any
it's
better?
catching up. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I'll
Uh-huh.
just talk slowly. Because ultimately, what we do as behavioral analysts is we are in the field of applied behavior analysis, and so in a clinic, it is very, very clinical. There's not really any outside factors that come into play. Whereas if you're in a home, sometimes the
Mhm.
TV guy shows up, or you have a sibling at the house. So there's some things that you can't control. So it's very in a clinic, it is a more controlled environment. In a
Okay,
school,
understood.
it's crazy. You can imagine
Mm-hmm.
with so many different kids and teachers. So yeah, that's kind of the difference between those.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. So when I saw that you were a licensed behavioral specialist, and then also let me have it in front of me. Also a certified, what is the difference? Let me say it. I want to look back at it. It's a board certified behavioral analysis and the licensed behavior analysis. What's the difference?
So, in it depends on the state. So, for the board certification, I'm gonna say I'm like 95% sure that it's an international qualification, just the BCBA, and that is the graduate level certification that you do. We kind of work under the like the medical board. So for the state of Virginia, I am a licensed behavior analyst in the state of Virginia under the medical, like under a medical board. So yeah, so I got the licensed behavior analyst just because I had you have to have that license within the state of Virginia, but there are a couple of states that don't require it yet. Um, but I think it's really good to make sure that people who are practicing are just licensed in all different ways. Like I don't think you can. Then people from different organizations can make sure that everybody's being ethical, using their board certification, and just make sure that we keep track of all of that stuff because it's super important. Just because behavior analysis hasn't always had the best street cred, um, because there's a lot of there is a lot of misconceptions about behavior analysis, and so it's really important that people who go through the trouble of getting their board certification, for the most part, um, want to be really good at their job.
Well, that makes sense. So, what are some of
Mhm.
those misconceptions?
Yeah, so I actually like wrote those down because I wanted to be ready. But so a lot of it is when you think behavior analysis, everybody, my husband always jokes with me and says, "Well, you just modify behavior," because he knows it kind of like bubbles me on the inside. But we don't modify the behavior. We look at why people do what they do. What is the maintaining factor of why this person keeps hitting anybody who comes near them, and then because of that and how we figure out that, we can then change things in the environment to help them be more like have those behaviors become more socially significant. So you are hitting me because you don't want me to come near you. I'm going to teach you some functional communication to say, hey, please don't come near me. I need a break. So instead of you hitting me, that replacement behavior that I'm going to teach you is please back up. So that is definitely a big one. If we don't modify the behavior, we change things in the environment to help the individual be more successful.
I love it. That sounds exactly what I do with my sixth grader.
Yeah.
His behavior, like, we don't have to like clear the desk. you know, and we don't have to throw things at our teachers or staff. We can actually use our words, our language, and say, I need a break, you know. I need to take some deep breaths. Like, I know he has this skill, but I know in the moment sometimes it's like, you know, a little overload. But, you know, when I talk to him, he can, you know, just share, I just needed a break, mom. I was like, yeah, please, can you ask for that next time? Just a break, you know, so you can be able to
Yeah.
regulate yourself, become more compliant.
Yeah.
So I
And it's
love
also
that.
super. Yeah, it's and for just I'll jump back to the misconceptions in a little bit, but it's so important to for people to understand that behavior change takes time. Um, if you work with a 6-year-old who has been doing like, again, I'm just going to use hitting. It's the most frequent thing that we see. They're hitting for something. They've been doing it for 6 years, and it's been serving a purpose for 6 years. If you start
Mhm.
behavior analysis and ABA after 6 years, it's not going to be. It's not a
Mhm.
fairy wand that's going to fix that. It's going to get fixed. It's going to take time because the neurons in their brains and everything have to change, um, because they've been doing that one thing for so long. It takes time for them to learn that new skill.
I could believe that. Yeah.
Wow. As you're talking, I'm trying to apply a lot of that knowledge base to Morgan because I think we have two scenarios here. We have Crystal, whose son is verbal, but you have
Yeah.
Morgan, who's nonverbal.
Mhm.
So tell me how those same techniques can work with her, because if she does need a break and she's nonverbal, how does she verbalize that without speaking it out of her mouth?
How does she communicate that
Excellent
Yeah.
question.
to her parents and to staff members or anyone?
Especially somebody who doesn't know her.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, so there are a couple of things, and communication is definitely one of those things that is super important for us because, again, most of them, we quote unquote maladaptive behavior, um, it serves a purpose. So we do need to figure out like what that purpose is. So in order for a person who is nonverbal, you have some of the things that you could do is you could teach them how to use like pictures. You have picture exchange systems, and just teaching them by you show this picture to somebody, it says I need a break, and that's going to get them to give you that break. You have speech devices. If the individual is able to navigate a speech device, I know I don't want to speak for SLPs, but like you have these kind of buttons that you can have recorded messages on where they can just tap those. Not that easy to carry around, but and sign language. So there are definitely a variety of different ways that you can teach communication skills to kids who are verbal and nonverbal. And I mean, sometimes even our kiddos who are able to communicate effectively vocally, once they get into that much of a like stressed environment or kind of um, where they aren't able to think straight, a picture
Mhm.
works just as well for them because it just reminds them really quickly, oh wait,
Yeah.
I can for that. Or you can still use that picture until you have that skill, like practice that skill over and over, in order to then verbally say, hey, I do need a break.
Yeah.
Because when I'm mad, my brain shuts down. I don't like to talk. I don't like to do anything. So sometimes even for myself, I need sticky notes up, and it's like take a breath. Sometimes my little 2.5, 3-year-old, when I'm getting upset, he'll tell me, "Mama, take a breath." So um, yeah, he is one.
Wow. So
Okay.
for me, how do you handle those dangerous behaviors until you get that behavior under control, those tantrums? So I hear you say, hey, some of these bad behaviors have gone on for years. So of course you can't change them overnight. but how do you deal with those bad, dangerous behaviors until you get things in place?
So, working with the dangerous behaviors, again, it is solely based on the individual. So, it just depends on the things that they have available to them. Typically, what I would do as a behavior analyst is have an emergency plan ready for
Mm,
anything that could harm other people, could harm themselves, like to the point of like hospitalization. And then you just, that is your main focus. If there is like 20,000 things you want to help that child with or that individual with, you focus on those behaviors that are severe. And be that, I mean, you have to do functional behavior assessments.
Yes.
It's where you observe, and that's a nice thing about a clinic also, to be able to do those in a kind of a quote unquote safe environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just you target those immediately and you have to figure out why they're doing what they're doing. Like, is it medical? Medical is usually the first thing that we try and rule out. Is it because they don't feel well? Are they sick? Especially for our individuals who are nonverbal, like we need to figure out if there's physically, medically something wrong with you. That is the first thing that we need to target. And then after that, we figure out, is it just a learned behavior? Because behavior is ultimately shaped through a learning behavior. So if something has been reinforced over time, that's what's going to serve that purpose until we can figure out how to help you in a more social significant way improve that. So I guess it's not a straight answer.
mhm.
Depends on the individual, but definitely those very extreme behaviors, we want to tackle them first. But it's every kid is different.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the two of you would know that too. Like with Morgan, and your, did you say your son?
Yes.
Chris? Yeah, like they are two very different individuals with very different behaviors. So it is incredibly important to just figure out, first of all, is it anything medical, and then we go to the behavioral part of it. And is there anything in the environment that's kind of like getting to them? So, um, yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. I don't want you to get away from those
I know.
misconceptions.
I was just about to say, let's
Yeah.
go back to the
Sorry.
misconception.
Because I think that's
Yeah.
huge. I think we
Mhm,
want to know. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then a lot of it is like people think it fixes autism. It does
Mhm.
not fix autism. It doesn't fix anything. It just helps you. It's just an evidence-based approach where we are, again, taking things in the environment to see how we can set people up for success. Because obviously something isn't working, and it isn't just used for autism, because like I said, I've worked with an array of different disabilities, and it's not even just for people who have disabilities. They use ABA in organizational behavior management. They use it for some of it they can use for like eating disorders, for addiction. There's a lot of different ways that you can use ABA, because everything we do is behavior. Um,
Yeah.
if a dead man can do it, it's not behavior. But other than that, everything you do is a behavior.
I never thought
So
about it like that, but that makes sense.
yeah, so yeah, so that's one of the it just helps them interact. Like we just help people with their environments and how we can make them like more successful. So it does not fix people with autism. It doesn't fix anybody's person. It just, we need to figure out ways how to help them in the way, like in their world almost. Um, yeah. Then another thing is it only makes the caregiver's life easier. That's not necessarily true, because that is such a group effort. When you
Mhm.
have people who come into your home, it is super important for the family to be involved in that therapy. I cannot stress it enough, because otherwise, if it's just your registered behavior technician, who is the people who kind of do our job as BCBAs for us, if we have a big caseload. Like we write the plans, they implement them, and then we kind of work with them and do the data and stuff. But it's so important because if it's just that person who's doing the work with your child, they're not going to progress because then they learn that they only have to do those things with this person.
Mm-hmm.
I think my biggest frustration sometimes is if we go into schools or if we are in homes where just people don't have the knack or the wanting to interact with us and us help their children. Um, but ultimately, like we have to change our behavior in
That's
order to help them. So yeah, so that's that one. And then a big one that they used to think is that we only use punishment based
Mm-hmm.
approaches, which is absolutely not the case. The majority of people that you would ever come into contact with, and I'm really sorry if I offend anybody, but the majority of people that you come into contact with only want to try the positive reinforcement based approaches because we don't want to put anybody under any duress unless it's typically the very, very severe safety concerns.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, like we don't necessarily use punishment based procedures as people think we do. We
Mm-hmm.
really there's a big push to be trauma informed and to be using those the positive based approaches. And I will say there is a time and place for punishment procedures, but um, there's a time and place for punishment procedures. Um, and getting into that is just like a whole other thing because you have your positive and your negative reinforcement and punishment. So if you are into ABA, you should go look up what the difference is between those four things. But I could talk for hours about what those are, so I won't do that.
I
um,
can imagine.
and then yeah, and then another one was it's training people to comply with instruction. So people tend to think of it as, especially people who use kind of edible reinforcers. Um, Sometimes people say we train them like we train animals, which isn't the case. Typically, when we use edibles, it's because they're so quick because you eat it and it's gone. It's not like you give them something tangible they can play with or an activity that'll then cause another behavior because you have to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we are not training people to comply with instruction. We are just helping them figure out like what kind of things will help them be more independent. So yeah, so if we need to sit there and go over one thing 50 times, we're going to do that because eventually it's going to be in their brain and they're going to be able to just kind of come out with it. And they don't need us to say, all right, what do you do here? Say this. So it's just there's always a means to the end. We are
Mm-hmm.
always working methodically. It is like what we do is data drives everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because we like I love data. I like my Excel spreadsheets, but people are getting fancy now with all of their data things you can do online. So
The
don't
graphs
get to
and all of that.
as much as I used to. Um, but I guess you should grow with the technology and the time. So, um,
Yeah.
but it's super important to know that. Yeah, so that's kind of a lot of some of the bigger misconceptions. But yeah, just the biggest thing I want people to understand is that we are not, again, we are not changing people's behaviors and we're not trying to change the person. We're just trying to help them figure out this world just as everybody else is. They just need an extra hand.
absolutely. I think that it's just out there on the internet, especially on social media, it's always a controversy about, is this effective? Is it not? And I just think that maybe it's on an individual base. You try it for your child and see, but the
Mm-hmm.
involvement of the family, the household
Mm-hmm.
makes a huge difference. The meeting with your behavior analyst and implementing what is being done in the center or in the home or in the school, implementing it in your home, in your day to day. it makes
Mhm.
a huge difference. So I believe everything you're saying. I did so Meg, I have 5 kids, and my youngest two are autistic and they have ADHD. One is 15 and one is 12. And so just thinking of my 12-year-old, he was the one that did go receive ABA services. And he just had a huge issue with transitions and things like that. But his home is like his safe place. And
Mhm.
so it's hard to hear
Mhm.
about his behaviors when I'm like, he doesn't do that at home. But I did implement, I learned so much um, from his center, from those that work with him. I learned so much. I was like, well, I'm just learning this with the 5th kid. I could have learned this. If I knew this now, it'd have worked on all my kids, like nonverbal cues, like not going there, like if you're like sit down
Yeah.
and you're like sit. And you're like, sit, and then your kids respond. They was like, don't ever get there. And I know we shouldn't, but it took my 5th kid to be like, I need you to sit. And then if he didn't, I like moved his body to the seat. I pointed to the seat. Then I moved his body. It was like more nonverbal cues. And now I just give
Mhm.
eye contact. I can look at my older kids and they know. But now I look at my 12-year-old and I'm giving him the eye like, you gonna figure out, you know what I want you to do. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
it's just it was just I learned that we give so many commands throughout a day to a
Mhm.
child, and you're saying, come here, put this away, clean your room, sit down. And I was like, I couldn't believe we really do that. So,
Mhm.
I learned a lot as a parent, even like I said, even on kid number 5, and it made a big difference. So I really do commend you and the work that you do in the community that you're in and those that support what you do. So I mean, I love that you came up, that you shared those misconceptions, because that is exactly what I see on social media. Those are, the conversations, and it all depends on location, what service you use. It still can, people can still have a not so good experience, but
Mhm.
it's not
Mhm.
the overall. It could have been
Yeah.
just that individual, maybe that center, maybe they want up to par, or that organization. Um, it's just kind of hard to put a blanket over all and say that doesn't work. Don't get one up. Don't get that for your child. Don't. I
Mhm.
wouldn't waste my time. It doesn't help. You know, it's really an area for many families to explore. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and that kind of what you've been saying there, there's kind of like two parts to that. I just want to remember now what both of those were. But so your child best,
Mhm.
and if you think that a certain like therapist is just not the right person for your child, it is in your right to say, I don't think that they have personalities that match.
Exactly.
Um, I have I like all my kids that I work with, but I do have kids where it is much easier and much more comfortable for me to work with them just because we just kind of click. And that's okay because you don't have to like everybody. And for these kids to be learning from us, they need to feel safe and they need to
Mhm.
feel like they have a connection. So it is completely in your right to always make sure that you advocate for your child in that sense. Um, I think that was my one part. Yeah, I don't know. But yes, sometimes I just talk and then I don't really know where I'm going with it, but just bear with me.
No, you're doing
But
good.
That's all of us.
what I wanted to say there is that again, then advocating for your child, it's important to advocate without kind of like being super, super aggressive. And Paula, because I know you, you are almost like you are that perfect parent because you respect what we try to do, especially
Mhm.
what we were doing at camp, because I got to work with Morgan.
Yes.
you definitely put your foot down. And it
Yes.
wasn't over every little thing. If she came home
Mm-hmm.
with a scrape, you just wanted to know,
Yes.
where did the scrape come from? But
Yes.
if there were safety concerns, you are a parent who stood by your child and you want the best for your child. And I do really commend you for that, because sometimes we do get families where the parents are so, they just want, if anything goes wrong, they just want to kind of come at you. And I do there, I do respect that, because I do not have kids who have a disability, so I can only imagine. um
Mm-hmm.
but it is super important to both work with people, know
Yes.
what your limits are and their limits are, and just make sure everybody's working as a team. But always, again, always advocate for your kids. But try not be the person who is just yelling, because it's
Mm-hmm.
hard working in our field.
Yes.
I love it. It is hard, but I love it. And sometimes we just need to make sure that we treat everybody. Everybody wants to be treated with respect, and that goes for us to the
Exactly.
families, and for the families to us. Mm.
And I agree. I totally agree with you. And I'm glad that you brought that up because for those that don't know, Meg was working with Morgan, and me and Meg have known each other for 10 years. I have the highest respect for Meg, and it's funny because when we talked offline, she said, "Paul, I didn't even know half of what I knew when I was working with Morgan, but I couldn't tell." And I do think it is important to understand that we are a team. Now, I'm not saying you go when you drop your child off and you don't know what's going on. I feel like as a parent, you should be putting your child into a safe environment. And I don't think any parent would just say, "Hey, I'm just going to take my child anywhere and just drop them off." But for me, anything that Morgan and Jeremy was involved in, I knew everything from A to Z. Um, and then for me, also, I think it's important to develop a relationship with the people that are working with your children. And like you said, Meg, I think for me, I had to make sure that I trusted the people and the people trusted me and I trusted them with Morgan. But I think all of that is a part of that, like that team approach that you say. It's definitely a team approach. And for me, I think another thing that made it so real is that I was totally upfront with what Morgan was dealing with. I would tell them she's off the chain, she's
Yes, you
determined,
did.
she's stubborn. And I was just, I mean, and I will say at this particular camp, it started off with a day thing. And as time went on, this was the first time Morgan stayed away from me that was not with family members. And I can honestly say, when she was at that camp with Meg and Doria, I was at total peace because our relationship had graduated to that point. So I do
Yeah.
believe that when you are working with, even your behavioral specialist, even the school that Morgan goes to, I am very involved in her school. I make sure that I have relationships with everybody. And there are times that I have to say, "Hey, I didn't agree with this." But we talk that out. It's not a thing where I'm coming in there slamming doors. Nah, it's you gotta handle things appropriately. So I totally
Yeah.
agree with you. And I also want to say, as far as when you're saying that when you're coming in the house to work with, the individuals, that it's a family thing. And I agree. To me, it's like homework. It's like when your child learns something in school and then they have homework to come home to reinforce what they're learning. Jeremy, I was totally involved with him that whenever he was working with something in school, when he came home, I reinforced it at home. So that's the way I look at with Morgan. When she's learning
Yeah.
something, even at the school she goes to now, I'm always asking them, "Hey, tell me what you guys are working on," because I want to mirror that as much as possible in my home. So I think that's where that team approach comes in again, where we as the parents, they don't just come home and we put our feet up and like, "Yeah, I don't care what you did at school." No, you have to work. You have to work in concert with that school and with those technicians. And because if not, then when your child is learning something, I know with Morgan, she doesn't always keep it. So when I reinforce it at home and then they reinforce it at school, it becomes where we're working as a team. And most cases, she progresses tremendously.
Yeah. And then, yeah, one thing for people who, if anybody is thinking of going into an in home sort of situation as the therapist or as the RBT, one thing a professor of mine, when I was doing my graduate degree, he did say to me, when he first started, he would go into a home guns blazing and was like, you have to change this, 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 and this. And people were like, nah, I don't want this guy in my house. This is crazy. So if you do go into people's homes, make sure like just simple things like be polite. I always thank people for letting me into their home. If I've been them for 6 months, a year, I thank them for letting me into their home because as a parent myself now, cannot imagine having somebody come into my house, tell me how to parent my child.
Wow.
I can only imagine. So just for people who are thinking of going in home, just make sure that you keep that in mind. And you are not with their kid 24/7. If they tend to slip up on a plan that you have written, it's okay. Tomorrow is another day. Yeah, I think that's very important to know, so that we don't just go in guns blazing and work on everything that we need to work on. You need to make sure that you do, like Paula said, you need to build that bond and that trust.
Mhm.
And even like, yeah, I'll stop there. Otherwise, I'm going to just dig myself in a hole here. So
Especially
that's
with the
what I would like.
child. Especially with
Yeah.
the child, because I know the type of person that Morgan is. You have to win her over before she even
Hmm.
lets you even come near her. So I think that is
Yep.
so important when you say developing that relationship with that child. I think that is totally important because
Yeah.
too, for me, because Morgan is nonverbal, I kind of rely on her to tell me who she's comfortable with. And because of the way she interacts with a person, I can always tell when she's comfortable. If she's comfortable, most times I'm comfortable.
Hmm.
Yeah, they know. They know how people look at
Mhm.
them. They know how people are treating them. They have these extra senses that we don't know what they are,
Yeah.
but they know.
I call it spidey senses.
They just fight. Yeah,
Now have
my 3-year-old. I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at my job. I'm not good at my job at home. I Arguing with a 3-year-old is never something I thought I would do, and I would tell parents not to do it, but I do it.
So you know
well
how
like
hard it can be for some parents to try to implement some things.
Oh, exactly. And that's why I said, like, like, especially since I've had kids, like, it is so important for me to make sure that families, like, understand that if you make a mistake and if you have a bad day, it is okay.
mhm.
We will
Now
work on
Meg,
it tomorrow.
have you ever had any situations that you just felt like you just could not do it, like this situation you came across an individual where you felt like you could not help them, not because there were personality conflicts, but just because you felt like this person and I don't want to say this, but the person was kind of um not able to be helped. Have you ever come across a situation like that?
Um, yeah, and I do understand what you're saying with like not being able to be helped. Again, sometimes people just need different approaches, and that's why people in behavior analysis have their niche and their expertise. So, um, for the most part, I would say that I could work like right now. I could work in a school setting. Where it's kind of easy, but then when you get more into those kind of safety concern behaviors, I think those are usually the really difficult ones to work
Mhm,
with. And I'm thinking of like a specific case. I think that's one thing where like I've not worked in a residential,
mhm,
but yeah, I guess the school that I used to work at up in Pennsylvania, I wouldn't necessarily say that they they weren't able to be helped, but it was definitely an extreme challenge to be able
Mm,
to set up the environment for them. Because again, working in the school, you only have those 6 hours to keep them
Mm,
successful. They go home and then they get reinforced with everything that they were being reinforced for at home, and they come back to school the next day and you start from scratch every
mm.
day.
Oh, wow.
wow,
Wow.
that is a
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah. And then
Yeah. So
just with all the
sometimes, and
home.
I think yeah, sorry. And I think in our field, people are very open to be able to help each other, and that's one thing where social media has. I have my thing about social media, but I think in that sense, knowing what people's expertise are, it has made it a lot easier for you to access somebody that has like experience in something that you may like that might be a little bit similar.
Hmm.
So I think in that respect, at least for if you get to a place where you feel like you are no longer being successful or being able to help someone, um, I think it's also actually really important as a professional to know when you've hit your limit before
Mm,
somebody gets hurt. Um,
mhm.
yeah, and if people aren't making progress, you should probably like kind of discuss it with the team and the family and see like what the next steps are. Um, yeah.
Wow.
Wow. I can see that, especially
Mm,
in a school setting. So
yes.
those challenges. Meg, you were talking about you like data. And
Mhm.
how do you present your data like to parents? Because I think sometimes well maybe as a parent, measuring how they're measuring improvements or digression or regression, and you know I think something like that. How is it presented so that they can get a full understanding?
Mhm,
So a lot of what I try and do, I won't say that I'm always the best at doing it, but I like to check in with the families,
Mhm.
especially like at the end of a week, just kind of like checking in, like have they noticed any differences? Have they noticed anything that might be worse? And then once we have like enough, I guess like a couple of weeks of data to kind of like look at stuff just to show them that we're either doing better or we need to make some changes to the programming. The nice thing about what all these online platforms that we use now is they graph the data very well.
Mhm.
Um, and then just kind of explaining to parents like what those graphs mean. So kind of going through with them and it's like, if it's a behavioral skill that they are learning, like they are able to do this successfully this many days in a row now. So we might be moving on to something else. A lot of so one of the assessments we use for younger kids is called the VB map, and
mhm,
it's a verbal behavior program, but it has a really nice little grid. So if you do your first assessment, and it's color coded, and then after however long you want to use it for, so for the company that I work for now, we run on 6 month authorization periods. So after those
mhm,
6 months, we do another assessment. So it's kind of those pre and post test type stuff,
mhm,
just to
mhm,
show them where they've made some progression. And I actually like felt really good about one of the clients that I have right now because we started out with minimal skills, and when you look at the data that is presented for him now, you can just that like it just talks for itself. So
mhm,
yeah, so I
mhm,
guess for me it's just talking to the families and kind of meeting them at their level because some families are very versed in data and like analysis and being able to read stuff, and some families aren't, and that's okay. So it's just kind of meeting them at their level and making sure that you talk to them and make sure that they understand, because we do get a lot of families who especially when I worked in the school district, you would sit in IEP meetings and it's families who may not have necessarily um, graduated high school or
mhm.
like I don't want to downplay anybody's skills or anything, but you could see they struggle understanding what all of these professionals are talking about. And at some point you just need to stop and be like, okay, how about we just explain like What are the good things?
Exactly.
What are the things we need to work on? Because a lot of times we just get so focused on all of the things. And I know it's important to know what we need to work on, but we need to just tell these parents like what these kids like their successes. Because I do think sometimes we just get stuck on all the things that we need to continue like to work on, and all of the things that are bad and terrible in this world. Um, so yeah, it so in regard to the data, just make sure that you meet the parents to like where they're at, um,
I love
without
that. I
like
love
belittle. Yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, Meg, because even sometimes it doesn't even have to do with like where you are in your
No.
education. It just
Mm-mm.
could be that, you know, sometimes it's navigating a world that you really don't know when you enter an IEP meeting. And
Yeah.
then you also start to feel like they're talking over your head,
Yeah.
and they're
On
using,
purpose.
oh yeah, and then they're using like, you
Mm.
know, these little short phrases and stuff, and you're like, I'm supposed to know this, you know. So
Mhm.
I will say it took me some years to
Yeah.
get more versed. I won't
Mhm.
say I'm completely well versed,
Yeah. I
but
mean, I'm not completely versed in all the acronyms.
right, right.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just it's very helpful, and I think that that's something that's a great takeaway for those in the field to please meet, especially when you're having an expectation from us as parents to
That's
kind of
right.
meet
Mhm.
us where we are, you know,
Mhm.
so that we are, there are some of us who are really out here really wanting to support our children, to pull out
Mhm.
the best in them, to see them succeed
Yeah.
at whatever it is that we know their capabilities are. And we're just trying to get there. And it doesn't help when we're sitting there and we leave a meeting and we're like, what just
What
happened?
just
And so that's
happened?
why I like, right, you know, and that's why I like how you said you communicate that data to them, that information, those assessments that you made. Visuals definitely work good, but if the graphs are too
Mhm.
complicated, I'm like, I'm not sure why they showing me this chart. Like, what is
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
stuff going up and what's going down, and why is it a dotted line across? You know, because then they'll
Yep.
explain it too quickly, and then I'm like, I missed the whole point. So I'm thinking, did we reach it or not? You know,
Yeah.
like, like bring it down. I love that. You said, meet me where I'm at. And I really want you to bring it all the way down and let us
Yeah.
build on that. Like, bring it all the way down
Mhm.
so that, you know, me coming in, understanding, and then we could build on what I'm able to understand. So I think that's really important on all levels.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you saying that.
You're
Even
welcome.
for the accomplishments, I agree. I think when you come to a meeting, no one wants to constantly hear what their child has not done.
Right.
I think you do need to focus on the accomplishments, because I think it can be somewhat discouraging. Number one, because when you, and I'm gonna speak for myself, when I had Morgan and I was invited to an IEP meeting, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't. Now I went in with a game face on, but I think a lot of the people really don't even understand their role. Some parents opted not to even come
Yeah.
because, again, they didn't even understand their role or the importance of their role. And they didn't understand, again, this is a team put together, because there were times that I went into Morgan's IEP meeting and they made me feel not, I mean, this was when she was younger, but they made me feel like I didn't have a say in anything. I had to be taught. I bumped into an aunt. My aunt taught me my rights. They give you that little safeguard book,
Yes.
and it's a bunch of legal jargon, but it does not give you an understanding in layman's terms of what's going
Mhm.
on in for IEP meetings. So I just think a lot of that is so important, because even with Morgan, the behavioral therapist was an important role with
Yes.
Morgan's IEP. I work hand in hand
Mm.
with them about stuff that's going on at home. Some of the stuff wasn't even going on in the school, but because I had a good relationship with them, I brought it to them and said, "Listen, this is going on at home," and they were able to help me. So that's another great thing about making sure you have a good relationship with people, because there are things that's going on at home
Yeah.
that a lot of them are willing to help you with, to resolve it, or come to terms with it, or show you something. So all of that is very important.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Meg, you guys have it's like
A
you have a
big job.
24-hour job.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I want to
It's
know, Meg. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, no, no. You're good.
Well, I kind of wanted to know, like, how do you, what are some of the things that you do? Because I think you shared that you go in the home, correct?
Yeah.
And so when you're in the home, what are some of those strategies that you use to bring the parent on board?
So again, a lot of that is parent dependent. But where I typically start is just kind of just talking to them about kind of what they've experienced during the day or during the week. If I only go in once a week, um, and then for the company that I work for at the moment, we actually have parent goals.
Okay.
So the parents get to be
Mm.
involved. They have goals that need to be met in order for us to then, if their kid gets out of the program, like the parent also has to like graduate out of the program, because
Oh.
it's one of the ways. And I mean, some of the goals are super simple. It's like sit in one of our sessions for 30 minutes. You don't have to do anything, you don't have to say anything, just sit there and watch what's happening. So I think that's very important. And then just again, knowing how the parents learn. So it's important to kind of do a little interview with the parents also, and just like, what is the best way for us to communicate information to you? How do you learn? Because people learn so differently. Do you want us to talk about it first and then do it? Do you want to have me show it to you on a video? There's so many different ways. Parent buy-in is really difficult for me sometimes.
Mm.
But because parents are tired after a day of work, and I completely get it. Um,
Yeah.
but just kind of, yeah, setting those little goals for them, I think, is kind of how we then work and build on that. And kind of just showing them, especially for our kiddos who are nonverbal or kind of like on the higher end of our like the moderate, mild, the level 1, 2, and 3 for autism. If they're more on that level 3, like just showing them like a little bit of an ABA skill that like if you want your kid to come sit at the table for some like an example, like if the one thing they like is an iPad and you want them to sit at the table, bring the iPad to the table. And then you can slowly work out and fade away that iPad. So a lot of it, yeah, a lot of it is just kind of getting parent buy-in to start off with, and then parent building that relationship, and then setting little goals for the parents. I think that's probably the order that I try to do it in.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I like those parent goals.
I do too.
Yeah.
That is excellent.
Not all parents like them though.
I mean, I see why you do it, because you don't want your work to be in vain. You need that parent involvement. So
Yeah.
I definitely, and I think too, even that first scenario you used when you said about the child wanting you out of their space, I wanted to ask you about that. How
Mhm.
realistic is it for every time someone comes near them for them to push, "I don't want you in my space"? Or, okay, even if we do it at school, even if we do it in this setting, how does that prepare them if they go to a grocery store or something? Can they always ask this person, "Listen, get away from me, you're too close to me"? So I wanted to see, how do you somewhat fade that away, or make that
So
realistic in the real world?
yeah, no, that is a very fair question. It takes a lot of work. But to start off with, you want them to get that communication across. So at first, you honor every single time that they ask you to back away, and then slowly you fade out, and it's just a fading procedure. Then every two times they say it, you back away, and then you kind of you fade it away so much so that they understand that, like, if it's that they are truly in stress, they can use that in like a grocery store or something. But if it is because they're just trying to avoid work or trying to avoid that, you kind of teach tolerance to that work.
Mm.
So that if you're going to a grocery store, you practice. At first, you might have to start going in the mornings or in the evenings late when there aren't many people around, and start going. And then you can kind of go to the times that it is a little bit more busy and a little bit more busy. And it's tolerance training, and it's fading it out. It could take a week, it could take a year. Some kids
Yeah.
might never get there. Um,
Mhm.
so things like Target, where they do like the elderly can come at like certain
Yeah.
times. I think stuff like that would be good times, like to just talk to your store, see if that's something that's super important. See if there is a time where something like that they can come in and just be in the store, because they are practicing for themselves in order to be around a lot of people, especially if there's a lot of social anxiety going on there, if that is the behavior that we are trying to help with. Like, yeah, so it's a lot of like, we call them shaping behaviors and fading. You try and fade out,
Mhm.
so that they don't expect it every single time. But it takes practice. It's a lot of practice.
Mm.
But
Mm.
again, it's so hard because it's such an individual basis, like, and you need to figure out like what exactly is it about the store, and what exactly is it about the person that they're trying to push away. So yeah, it is all we do is just on an individual basis.
Brainstorm. What you do is brainstorm. That's, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a
like you.
lot.
Yeah, it's a lot because I'm gonna say even with Morgan with her social anxiety, there are times that I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna take her to certain things, but then there are times that me and my husband are like, nope, we're going. And when we go, it's like, okay, I may like if it's a loud setting like the movies, for instance, we know she doesn't really care for the movies. Okay. But if we're going to a restaurant with the family, she's not going to opt out of that all the time. And so it's like you're going to stay in the environment. We will bring you headphones. We will bring you an iPad. We will do different things so that you can be comfortable. But there are times that she's just not going to do it. And it was prime example. We went to one last Saturday. We didn't know what the restaurant was like. I mean, but everybody was there. As soon as she came in, she dropped to the floor. I said, honey, grab one hand. I got the other. But I could tell you this. Once we were there for almost 2 hours. We put a chair in the corner. He had one foot around a leg. I had one foot around a leg. Then he said, keep it near the corner because if she backs up, she's going to back up into the wall. She starts grabbing all the balloons. The balloons went up in the sky. Everybody was like, we don't care. But I can honestly say 45 to 50 minutes later, she sat there and was feeding herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So there are
yeah, and I
times
mean,
that people, yeah, you have
what
to.
you just described there is setting up the environment for success. Like,
Mhm.
like, it's loud. You take your headphones, you take your iPad. So in our fancy language, it's the antecedent manipulations. Like, you know that this is stressful for her
Mhm.
and this is hard for her, but you have figured out what potentially may work, and sometimes it may not work because she's having a bad day. You
Yeah.
have a
Right.
bad day, you can maybe control yourself, like, and you are able to not go out if you don't want to, but she still lives with you, she has to go with you. But if she has a
That's
bad day,
right.
you gotta roll with it.
You
You
gotta
got
use
to roll
wisdom.
with it. I know that's right. You do. You do.
Yeah.
And I know before we close out, Mac, what's the age range that you work with right now?
So right now, I what is it, 5 5 to 13 is what I work with now, but I have worked with as little as 3, and then up until I think 21 or 22. But like I said, ABA is for everyone.
I agree.
There's
Wow.
no age limit.
Well, another thing that I will say that I use on Morgan, which I'm sure you're an advocate for, is positive reinforcement. When she did that, we gave her, she loved high fives. We gave her high fives. We applauded her. She was smiling. And we were like, you did it. You didn't think you could do it, but you did it. So I think a lot of that, I've been around so many people as far as
Yeah.
behavioral therapists. I think I've become one. I might can get my credential.
I mean, you can go and start for your registered behavior technician. It's a 40-hour course. There you go.
I know.
Yeah,
I've
so
looked
But
into
yeah,
it. I've
that
looked
is an
into it.
excellent point. Yeah, that is an excellent point. That using the positive reinforcement, and when you are praising your kids, instead of just saying "good job," tell them exactly what they did right.
That's
Because
right.
sometimes we say "good job" so matter of factly, like it could be a good job for anything. But if
that's a
you,
good point.
Morgan, you did excellent sitting in that chair. She knows it's not anything that I did. It's because I sat in that chair. So be a little bit
Wow.
more specific when we provide that verbal praise. But the positive reinforcement it is what our it's kind of our bread and butter a little bit. So
Yes,
because
mine
we
too.
like to praise people because us as individuals, you like positive reinforcement. You like to tell people
That's
you're
right.
doing
Yes.
something right. So
Hmm. And I will say this, just closing this out. I think I mentioned before I was going to a class. It was like a pure bar class. I'm in there trying my best to get the form right, which is somewhat unrealistic. But when the lady came past and praised me, because I was like, I'm tired, I ain't doing no more. When she came past and praised me, I said, I felt like Morgan. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get this thing going. I'm a but just to show and instantly in my mind Morgan came to my mind, and I was like, wow, even me as an adult, I
Yeah.
love that praise, and it encouraged me to get that form right because she was like, "You are doing a great job," and I was like, "Is she nuts? I'm doing terrible," but I was like, "I'm gonna get that form right."
yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah, but when I tell you this was, we were definitely looking forward to this, Meg. You're a wealth of information. I mean, I'm
Yes.
not gonna lie. I wish
Mhm.
we all had behavioral therapists like you.
Yes.
Um,
Oh, I
because
appreciate that.
nah, it's awesome. And I will say, guys, listen, I saw this firsthand. I didn't get the one that has the master's degree and everything, but I can honestly tell you, I think part of being a behavioral therapist or any type of person in that field, you have to have a heart. You have to have a love for this type of job because it's a
Absolutely.
difficult job. But if that's where your heart is, it shows in the work that you do.
It
It
does.
does.
It
Hmm.
does.
It does.
And
But
it's very rewarding. I would not want to do anything else. And I mean, Morgan was one of those kids that when I worked with her at camps, like I could do this. I don't know how I want to work and what capacity I want to work with these kiddos, but here I am.
well, I'm glad she encouraged you. I'm glad she encouraged you because
Yeah.
honestly, you all did a great job with her. And I mean, I applaud you. I applaud the work that you do. I just say, I just hope anybody that's looking to go into this field that they hear what's needed and that
Yes.
they, will mirror your attitude, your zeal, because that's what we need more in this field. And I
Yes.
do appreciate you. I do.
Yeah. Thank you, Meg.
I take my
Well, thank you
scarf
so
off to
much.
you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
again,
this
guys,
was
this
so fun. I
this
didn't think it would be this fun.
See, we told you.
yes, we told you. Everybody that comes on our show starts off by saying they're nervous. We're like, oh, it's just a conversation.
Just a
And the
conversation.
time went past so fast, we're actually going over. But I just want to thank you, Meg. I mean, I asked Meg, she jumped at it. She was like, anything you need me to do. I really appreciate you. You're our first professional. You're our first professional on the job telling
Thank you,
us what they
Meg.
do in their field, and we appreciate you.
We do. Thank you so much.
Yes,
Hopefully,
yes,
I
yes.
shed some light. I don't know. I'll have to watch this again at some point to make sure that I wouldn't make a complete fool of myself.
No,
No,
you didn't.
did not.
And
Mm-mm.
like you say, we could have gone into other fields and been on here for 3 hours, but
Right?
we we do appreciate you taking time away from hubby and the
Yes.
baby and coming on
Thank
advocacy. Thank
you.
you, thank you, thank you. All right, guys. Have a
Have
good
a good
one. We'll see.
evening.
Well, advocacy will
Bye.
be on next Thursday, so we hope you'll join us again. Good evening, everybody. Bye.